At St. Haven Hospital, single dad Ethan Ward quietly patrolled the night as a janitor with a past no one cared to learn. And in the stillness of those late hours, when the rest of the world slipped into restless dreams, he carried both his mop and the weight of mistakes he never spoke of. Every echo of his footsteps down those polished hallways reminded him of what he had lost, what he was afraid to lose again, and what he was desperately trying to protect. His little daughter, Lily. Life had reduced him to shadows, but even shadows cling to the edges of light. And tonight, something in the air felt different, as if the hospital walls, always cold and indifferent, were waiting for a secret to unfold. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us of humanity, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel's Silent Hope. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. Ethan had been working at St. Haven for almost 3 years, surviving paycheck to paycheck, stitching together extra shifts to cover Lily's school fees and the small rented room they called home. People often believed janitors were invisible, and Ethan had learned to accept the comfort of invisibility. It made it easier to hide his past, a past filled with a wrongful arrest, a messy divorce, and a custody battle that had left him broken but not defeated. His daughter was the only reason he forced himself out of bed each day, dragging tired limbs and a tired soul through the world, hoping one day life would forgive him. The night shift was a strange world of its own. The hospital became quieter, almost fragile, as though every room whispered a different story, some of hope, some of heartbreak, some of endings. Ethan respected those stories, perhaps because he carried too many of his own. He cleaned the pediatric wing first, always careful around the sleeping children whose soft breaths, tiny fingers, and innocent dreams reminded him of Lily. He moved slowly, allowing himself a moment of tenderness as he folded blankets, picked up fallen toys, and straightened coloring books left open on bedside tables. He imagined what life would be if Lily didn't have to see him exhausted every morning, if she didn't instinctively check the fridge to be sure there was enough food for breakfast, if she didn't worry the way children never should. Then there was Ward 5C, a place he never enjoyed entering, not because it was haunted by sickness, but because it mirrored too closely the battles inside his own heart. This wing was filled with adults fighting for their last chances, clinging to life with trembling fingers. The quiet here felt heavier. A nurse once told him that everyone in 5 degrees Celsius had either loved deeply or lost deeply, and sometimes both. Ethan wondered which one he belonged to. Tonight, as he swiped his ID to access the hallway, he noticed a young woman standing alone near a window, her shoulders curled inward as if protecting a fragile truth. He recognized her. She had been visiting her mother for weeks. Her eyes were swollen and her hands pressed tightly together in silent grief. Ethan lowered his gaze and kept walking, not wanting to intrude, but the faint sound of her choked breath twisted something inside him. He wasn't a man used to offering comfort. His life had taught him silence was safer, but something made him pause. Maybe it was the way she clutched her jacket like a shield. Maybe it was the loneliness he recognized too well. He stopped a few steps away, unsure of what to say, unsure if saying anything at all might cross a line. But eventually, he whispered a soft, almost hesitant apology for her pain. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer cliches, didn't pretend to understand her world. He simply acknowledged it. The woman looked at him with surprise, not because of his words, but because someone had noticed her grief when everyone else hurried past. Before she could respond, Ethan nodded respectfully and continued down the hall, leaving her with a small sliver of human connection. As he walked away, he felt something strange stir in him. An old ache, but warming, healing, almost hopeful. His shift continued in the usual rhythm, emptying bins, disinfecting floors, mopping until his arms burned. The smell of antiseptic filled his lungs, the hum of machines filled the silence, and his thoughts drifted endlessly toward Lily. He had promised her they would go to the park this weekend, promised he would buy her the doll she loved, promised he'd never leave. Promises were heavy things, especially for a man barely holding himself together. But he made them anyway. Promises were how he kept going. Hours passed. The clock crept toward 3 a.m., the hour when night feels deepest, when even the strongest hearts falter. Ethan dragged his car toward the emergency wing, where chaos slept lightly. Nurses moved quickly but quietly, the kind of professionals who had learned how to carry compassion like armor. Ethan admired them, even envied them. They had purpose, respect, a place in the world he had been denied. The security guard on duty nodded at him, familiar with his silent routine. But tonight, fate had other plans. The automatic doors slid open, and a rush of cold air swept inside as paramedics hurried in with a patient on a stretcher. Ethan froze, not because of the urgency, but because the patient was a young boy no older than 9. His breathing was shallow, his face pale. His mother followed behind, sobbing uncontrollably, pleading with the doctors. Ethan's chest tightened. Memories hit him with cruel sharpness. He saw Lily's small face in that child's stillness. He saw his past mistakes when doctors had surrounded his ex-wife during a complication with Lily's birth. He saw the same fear in that mother's eyes that he once felt, fear of losing the only person who made his life worth living. Instinctively, he moved forward and gently grabbed the stretcher from the side to help push. It wasn't his job. It wasn't allowed. But sometimes humanity outruns rules. No one stopped him, because in moments of crisis, hearts take precedence over hierarchy. The doctors and nurses rushed the boy to the trauma room, his mother collapsing into a chair as her body gave out from panic and grief. Ethan stood there, trembling, feeling helpless and overwhelmed by memories that refused to fade. He wanted to walk away, but part of him couldn't. Part of him needed to stay, not for the boy, not for the mother, but for himself, for the man he wanted to become. Minutes felt like lifetimes. The mother's sobs filled the hallway, but no one seemed to hear her. No one but Ethan. He approached slowly, hesitantly, unsure of what he could possibly offer. He wasn't a doctor, wasn't a counselor, wasn't someone important. He was just a janitor with a past, a janitor with regrets. But sometimes the people who feel the least significant end up making the most difference. He sat on the chair beside her, leaving enough space to respect her grief. She didn't look at him, didn't need to. The presence of another human being was enough. Without speaking, he offered a small, worn-out handkerchief, the only thing he had that wasn't broken. She accepted it with shaking fingers. Tears dampened the fabric. She whispered a faint thank you, that was all. But in that thank you, something inside Ethan cracked open, something he had buried beneath years of hardship. The trauma room doors opened. The doctor stepped out and knelt beside the grieving mother. Ethan looked away, unable to bear the intensity of those moments. But then he heard relieved crying, the kind that burst from a heart that had braced for the worst and been granted mercy. The boy would make it. The mother sank to the floor, overwhelmed. Ethan closed his eyes and exhaled deeply, his own heart trembling in gratitude for a child he didn't know. As the mother was escorted inside to see her son, Ethan quietly stood and resumed his work. But his steps were different now. Softer, lighter, strangely renewed. That fragile encounter had awakened something in him, something he thought life had stolen long ago. When his shift ended near sunrise, Ethan walked out the back entrance of the hospital into the cool morning air. The sky held hues of blue and lavender, delicate and promising. He rarely saw the sunrise like this. Usually he was too exhausted or too focused on catching the earliest bus home. But today, he paused. He let the world feel big again. He let hope breathe. When he reached home, Lily ran toward him with her tiny arms wide open and her smile shining brighter than the morning sun. She jumped into his embrace, and he lifted her effortlessly despite the fatigue in his bones. In that moment, he realized that maybe he wasn't just surviving. Maybe he was slowly learning how to live again. Maybe life wasn't done offering him chances. For months afterward, Ethan continued working his quiet shifts at St. Haven, unnoticed by most, but no longer invisible to himself. Small interactions with patients' families, nurses, and even other janitors slowly pulled him out of the shell he had built around his heart. He started smiling more, started talking more, started believing more. And then, one night, something unexpected happened. The hospital administration called him into the office. Ethan feared the worst. Maybe someone had complained, maybe he had broken a rule, maybe they were cutting staff again. But when he sat down, the supervisor placed a file in front of him and said the hospital had noticed his dedication, his patience, his humanity. They offered him an opportunity, training to become a patient care assistant, a chance at a better job, a chance at a better life. Ethan felt tears gather in his eyes. No one had offered him a chance in years. No one had looked past his mistakes. No one had seen the man he was trying to become. But here, in the place where he had swept floors and emptied bins, someone saw him. Someone believed in him. That night, as he walked back into his shift, the hallways didn't feel so cold. They felt like home. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the hidden battles people fight every day, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Silent Hope. It truly helps us continue creating stories that uplift and inspire. Special request: before the ending, please drop a comment telling us which moment moved you the most. And as the world outside remained loud, busy, and often unkind, Ethan continued his journey, one quiet night at a time, proving that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who are never seen, never praised, yet continue to show up with a heart ready to help, heal, and hope again.